Have you ever just stopped and really listened to your city? I don't mean the traffic or the construction. I'm talking about the deeper sounds. The sounds of environmental strain, but also, if you listen closely, the sounds of hope. Our cities are facing some huge challenges, so today we're going to dig into how real change actually happens. Let's just kick things off with a number that really tells a story: 80%. A recent poll showed that over 80% of people living in major cities want much, much stricter environmental rules. Now, that's not just a statistic, right? That's a massive signal. The people want action, and that creates this really interesting tension that we're going to unpack. So, yeah, that brings us right to the heart of it. Our cities have a serious problem. And you have to wonder, with 80% of people on board for change, why are we still struggling so much to fix it? Well, because when you look at the data, it's actually pretty troubling. You'd think with all our new tech and innovation, things would be getting better. But in a lot of cities, pollution isn't just sticking around, it's getting worse. And this isn't some far-off issue. We're talking about the air we all breathe every single day. It affects everyone's health. And when we don't act, it's like a domino effect. It starts with worse smog, which, of course, directly hits public health. That, in turn, puts this incredible long-term strain on our environment, which makes it almost impossible to meet huge goals like lowering our carbon footprint. It's a vicious cycle, and it needs a real, honest-to-goodness solution. Which, it raises a big question. If the problem is so obvious and the public support is there, why aren't our current methods working? Let's take a look at why just making more rules often misses the point entirely. So, a really common approach is what's called prohibition. Think about banning a single factory from dumping waste into a river. And hey, don't get me wrong, that is an important first step. But does it really solve the bigger problem of why that waste is being made in the first place? Probably not. And this really gets to the heart of the matter. Are we treating the symptom or are we treating the actual cause? You see, punishing one company or banning one specific practice, that's just dealing with the symptom. Real, systemic change is about addressing the root cause. It's like rethinking our entire transportation system instead of just slapping fines on cars with bad emissions. And this forces us to think about a tough reality. What if the system itself is the problem? That's the gap we have to figure out how to bridge. The one between the 80% of us who want clean air and the huge, messy, disruptive change it's going to take to actually get it. Okay, so if simple rules fall short and that huge systemic change feels, impossible, then what actually works? Where do we find the leverage to make a real, lasting difference? Well, the answer might just lie in a story from the ground up. A story about a sound that eventually became totally impossible to ignore. So, picture this, a small neighborhood, and for years they've been living with this constant, low-frequency hum coming from a factory nearby. On top of that, the factory was polluting their water. For a long time, people just kind of accepted it, as the unfortunate cost of having local industry. But then, something shifted. The community didn't just complain. They created a blueprint for action. First, they clearly identified the problem, but they didn't stop there. They gathered hard evidence. They polled their neighbors and found widespread sleep deprivation and anxiety. Armed with that data, they went to the city council and demanded change. And that single focused demand, it ended up sparking a citywide movement. What their story shows us is a really powerful truth. Meaningful change often starts small, at the hyperlocal level. It begins when people find a way to speak together, with one collective, audible voice that the people in charge just cannot ignore. So, what can we learn from this? How do we take that one success story and turn it into a model that can actually work anywhere? It turns out the keys to this new model are all connected. It's about shifting our focus to real systemic change. And that means we finally have to ditch that old, false idea that you have to choose between a healthy economy and a healthy environment. That kind of shift is only possible with real, adequate investment in green tech, and it has to be powered by people who feel empowered enough to demand it. Which brings us right back to where we started, that 80%. When you look at it now, after hearing that neighborhood story, it doesn't seem like just a passive opinion anymore, does it? It's a massive, untapped reserve of political will. It's potential energy, just waiting to be converted into action. This is what that engagement sounds like. This is the audible voice of a population that's ready for real change. They're ready to build a political will that finally matches the scale of the problem. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. As that neighborhood proved, when a community finds its voice, change isn't just possible, it becomes inevitable. So, what's the environmental story playing out in your city? And what sounds do you need to start listening for?